Attention, everybody. This is going to be pretty gross, but you know it's not going to be gross after today. Your balls. That is right, because Bad Anime is still supported by a Manscaped. Use our code BAD20, that's BAD20 at checkout for 20% off anything at the Manscaped store. We would really appreciate it over here. Thank you all for supporting the podcast, and now let's talk about some gross-ass stuff. Oh, God.
It's bad. Anime. Bruh.
Fuck.
Hello, everybody. My name is John.
And my name is Rob.
And this is Bad Anime, the show where we decide, is this anime bad? Or traumatizing. To pull back the curtain a little bit, we haven't really talked about this one before we got on air.
And I'm proud
because
of us for
of
doing
reasons.
so.
Yeah, me too. There are a lot of things that we could have spoken about, but we just decided not to. But without saying that we decided not to each other, we just kind of went our separate ways and then came here to just do the thing.
To be fair, if we were to say anything, I think the only thing I would have said is, ah!
Like that blood-curdling scream at the last 30 seconds of this entire movie. Yes, I feel the same way.
Oh God, yeah, that was powerful, wasn't it?
It was weirdly powerful when I didn't think that I could be swayed anymore. But anyways, everybody, this is Midori or SHOJO SHUBAKI.
Yeah, there's a couple different alternate titles here.
Yeah, a couple different ones. But we're specifically talking about the movie. The semi-animated, as it's called, which makes a lot of sense actually. Film.
Yeah, when I saw that, I thought, okay, that's pretty weird. What are we getting here? Then I saw the actual film itself. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why they call it a semi-animated film.
I totally understood why.
I kind of want to call certain episodes of Evangelion semi-animated films.
Me too. I thought the same thing. Like when those scenes happened that were semi-animated, quote unquote, I thought the same thing.
I don't know. Just Go Nagai and Hideaki Anno coming together. It's like, hey, let's just make every kid really sad.
And that is what we got this time around. We are specifically going to be talking about, as we said, Midori Shoujo Tsubaki, but the 1992 semi-animated film came out in 92 in Japan. And in 94, there was a censored version of the movie that came out, which clocks in at approximately 15 minutes. I'm lying about that. There's no actual 15-minute censored version, but there is a censored version, which I imagine would be very short, given the contents of this
I'm kind of wondering if we
movie.
actually watched the censored version, because I've read somewhere that there's a version of this that's like 56 minutes. And the thing
really?
We just watched was... We'll take out the outro credits. It was like 45.
Yeah, about 45, I'd say.
So with official runtime of like 48.
Mm-hmm.
But still, which led me to think, I'm like, oh God, if this is the censored version, what 8 minutes did they cut?
I don't even know what I could expect from an uncensored version. And
because that's what happened when I was watching this. Of course, Violence Jack vibes, obviously, from the time frame and like massive censorship. I'm like, okay. Yes. Time to play Spot the Censorship. I was having a hard time with that because there was a lot that wasn't censored here. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we saw was horrifying in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Good.
And I'm just learning that hard anime, in particular, when it's from the mid-90s, it gets me. Like, it actually creeps me out when it's from that time frame. Something about like the hand-drawn stuff from the 90s when it's very rough and, spotty and gross, it adds to the horror for me personally.
I fully agree. I thought this, if it was animated like a 2020 anime or a 2023 anime, it would not be nearly as frightening. And I feel the same way. I feel weirdly the same way about black and white movies versus color movies.
Oh, right, yeah.
I think black and white movies have that moodiness and have that darkness, especially horror movies that scare me a little bit more than a movie with like insane production value and like all the blood and all the gore and stuff like that. I think this is a very similar trajectory to that, where the style that this was done in was just so blood-curdlingly horrifying.
Well, here's the thing. Actually,
it really contributed to how scary it was. Yeah, please ask.
I'm gonna split some hairs here.
Mm-hmm.
Were you scared or unsettled?
Unsettled.
Yeah, because here's the thing here. I wasn't really scared by this Some moments I was actually laughing, but the entire time my stomach was upset. I'm just like, oh. Then again, I didn't exactly eat well this weekend, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But no, but a lot of this show, I was like, ugh.
It was a lot.
Like I felt it in my stomach because this was, to sum it up in one word, I'm not going to spoil my thoughts, but this is objectively gross.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gross.
You know, this
Disgusting.
whole, I guess, this was released in theaters. I'm not going to call it an OVA, but even though it's OVA length, but this film was gross. It was just icky and ew.
Yep.
And then
it was a lot of gross elements.
A lot of gross. It started off bad. We meet because, and actually, I did a tiny bit of research on this. And
okay.
So there's actually way more historical significance here. Or, sorry, not historical. Let's call it cultural significance. Because of what a shoujo tsubaki actually is. She's actually kind of a stock character, like a kind of like a fair use stock character that they actually used in the kamishibai, which is actually an older form of Japanese storytelling where it translates basically to paper theater.
Okay.
So what it was, Bouncy, imagine this. Imagine back in the day, someone like in like 30s Japan, like putting up like, I don't know how to describe it exactly. Let's just call it like a podium with like a little screen, not a screen, but like a little slit on it where you can like, like where everyone like focuses their vision. Kind of like a puppet show.
Oh, okay.
But instead of that, they would put like slides of paper with like an illustration on it, and it'd be them narrating a story.
Yes.
And telling you what happens in between the slides, and then dramatically throwing slides into the in the holder, for example.
Yes.
It was them telling these wild tales with these illustrations. It kind of reminded me, like, you could draw comparisons to the 30s in America where they had sheet music, where like that's how songs were bought back in the day. You didn't buy recordings, you bought sheet music and you performed the song. It kind of reminded me of this, where you bought like the illustrations and you put it into like the display thing, but it's up to your job to convey the story.
Yes.
So it's an old form of Japanese entertainment, very popular with the kids at the time. The fact that this was probably shown to children scares me.
Yeah.
I really
yeah, it does.
I hope this is more adult-oriented in nature because a lot of bad things happened here. Even though our main character was a 12-year-old girl, and a fact that's kind of... I almost wanted to forget it at points because what the hell she was put through a lot of the time. But, you know, so it kind of... The fact that this is... You kind of get that feeling of kamishibai here because the way this is animated is sometimes there is no animation. It'll be a still image with dialogue and other sound effects going over it. So it's actually reminiscent of a narrator kind of telling the story. It's fully voice acted, so it's not the same exact thing, but the spirit is still there.
It really is. I when I was watching it, I more so saw it as a, weirdly enough, not an anime, but a motion manga, like a moving manga. Like
you could definitely draw a comparison to that.
Because it was very
somewhere in between, honestly. Because some scenes were fully animated, which was weird.
Right, they were, and some scenes were stills that were grouped together. And I thought actually the stills part of it, especially when stills were kind of put back to back next to each other, I thought it actually helped. Not helped. I don't know about helped, but it actually kind of put you in the environment more so into the show and like into the characters.
Kind of give you more feeling of like the atmosphere, maybe.
Yes, I think it was more atmospheric that it was able to do that with the imagery. But before we dive straight into this and talk about the story and talk about what happened and all these things, so I picked this one.
Yes, you did.
And the reason is because I put up a video on our Instagram about Redo of Healer.
Right.
That got quite a good amount of traction. And
I turned off my Instagram notifications for a while because of that one.
It was surprising because, first of all, I didn't really think anybody really knew that much about Redo of Healer. But either way, I put up this reel. And a lot of the comments were, you think Redo of Healer is bad. Just check out SHŌJO TSUBAKI and Akame Ga Kill. And I was like, oh.
And they said some other ones too.
There were some others in there, which I'm
already
sorting through
covered.
some comments. We have, yes. Even School Days came up, and I was like, School Days and Redo of Healer are two very different. Like I thought Redo of Healer was way worse than School Days.
You can't compare the two.
It's very different. And so people were like, yeah, I couldn't watch School Days, but loved Redo of Healer. I was like, who the fuck are you? But either way.
Okay,
either
if you're
way,
one of those people and you're listening, send us an email, DM us. I want to talk to you.
How do you do that? I would love to know.
I want to know how your moral compass works. And I
would love to know.
I'm not trying to judge. I'm genuinely intrigued.
But SHOJO Tsubaki, or Midori, I guess, is one of the shows or films that came up the most when people were talking about
fucked up
kind
stuff,
of near offensive, fucked up anime medium stuff.
Right.
And that came up a lot. So I had to go on a bit of an adventure to find this, actually. It wasn't on YouTube. It wasn't on any sites necessarily, any like Crunchyroll or anything like that. I had to like dig through a couple different links in order to find it. And I sent you that version. And that version was like a very crudely subbed version of the show, which, as we said on the top,
across, thankfully,
it did. As we said on the top, though, it may not have been the full uncensored version, but it did do a lot. And boy, I think we can start here with what it did do, because I think the first,
if we have to,
few scenes are pretty exemplary of what we would get throughout the entire show. Of course, I mean, the show kind of opens up with, or the movie film opens up with Midori getting home. And she lives in Japan, obviously, and the family is very impoverished, it seems, or very
and
poor.
It looks like it takes place pre-World War II, so let's go say like the 20s or 30s.
It actually is in. I remember one point in the subs that it talked about being the 1800s. I think it was the 1880s or 90s or something.
Okay, so sometime after the Meiji Restoration. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, sometime after that. God, wow, look at us talking Meiji Restoration before World War I, World War II. Damn, pretty cool.
You were very excited that I brought that up.
I was very. I'm such a history nerd. I love that, and I was actually trying to see the history throughout this film as well. And I think some points that I want to bring up later kind of relate to. Relations between Japan and China, relations between Japan and Japan in that time period in like the early 1900s, late 1800s.
Right,
so
yeah.
I just thought there were some interesting comparisons to be drawn from this. But either way, we start very impoverished Midori and her mother and father. Her father, unexplained, mysteriously leaves.
Yeah.
And she comes home one day after meeting this random guy who owns some kind of circus or
like traveling freak show.
She comes home to find her mother dead from her disease and being eaten by rats everywhere. And
I gotta say that scene was genius because she lifted the cover and found her mom being eaten. Like she was talking to her mother in bed, realizing there was no response. Lifted the cover that was on her with the sheet or whatever, and she was getting eaten alive by rats, and it was gruesome. Yeah,
pretty gruesome. So it gave you kind of a good idea of what you were gonna get.
Yeah,
for the next
it kicked off
45 minutes.
What we're getting into,
and the first part. Blew by pretty quickly, I thought. I remember getting about halfway through this movie and being like, oh, it's not over yet. Because I really thought they really blew through a lot of the stuff pretty quickly. And all those
the pacing
things,
here was pretty fast, especially in the beginning. Because they very much sped up Midori getting kidnapped by the clown folk, these traveling... Whatever you want to call them.
That guy that she met the day that she found her dead mother, he's the head or the accountant of this traveling freak show. And he told her, if anything happens to you, you should come meet me here.
Right.
Which I don't know what to think of that. Maybe he had something to do with her. I doubt it, but it was just
but
very
you never know.
Explicit timing that he was like, meet me if anything bad happens. She's like, oh, whatever. All right. And then cool. Something bad happened, so she decided to
I better go meet that guy.
Which is a horrible decision that turned out very badly because she met that guy and she also met the rest of the freak show. And her job and life then became traveling with the freak show and cleaning and sewing and doing various things for this traveling show.
Odd jobs,
but it also included getting viciously sexually assaulted by all of the carnies.
Yep.
All the time. which was pretty gruesome and pretty disgusting, and also
it was kind of there was a lot of that taunting going on to bring in more comparisons. A redo of Healer, she walks in on a couple people doing it, and one of them's like, "Yeah, Midori, get in here," and she's like, "No."
Yeah.
And then she ran away. Then unfortunately, it's hard to joke about this one because of like, especially the early chapters. It's hard to joke about because of all the assault, physical,
it all
sexual,
just happens that
etc.
way.
Emotional abuse.
I remember the first. It was done in like songs or parts.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Like not weird. It was a cool enough device. I'll give it credit. Where like they're like, hey, where they split it up into sections, and said like, then they had title cards like saying, hey, this is the section you're in right now. So that was kind of neat, if anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And song, I remember the intro, the introduction to the whole thing where she finds her mom and stuff has like a specific title, but the next title, which was song number 1, when she joins the fairgrounds, was called Patience and Submission. And when I saw the title of that, I just went, oh, here we go.
Exactly. No, my
here we go.
Alarm bells started ringing in my head. I was like, all right, you're recording later today. Wait to grab a beer then. It'll be worth it. It'll taste much better because you earned that one sailor.
Yeah, but that first section is really just her getting abused mentally, physically, like everything under the sun by this group of carnies who, one of them, if we want to get a little specific, one of them is like a contortionist. One of them like eats snakes as her like job.
Yeah.
The other one just has no arms. I don't know what his gimmick is, but he just has no arms.
There's one big one.
Yeah, there's
like
a big guy. There's a big boy with an arm eye patch, and he's just, I don't know, strong. And then there's like a guy that doesn't have arms or legs, so he's like a caterpillar. So I don't know. They really like, and the animation really amps all this stuff up. It's like a lot of body morphing and body horror, and that only comes more into play later.
And we're no strangers to body horror on this show. We've covered a fair amount of things that have a bunch of body horror, and even still, we went.
I mean, even Ixer 1 had body horror, but this one was pretty scary to look at, to be honest. Pretty unsettling.
It was gruesome and just that thing. It was never scary. Maybe it was sad and gross. Like at one point, Midori was taking care of some dogs she found.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and then like I know one of the freaks, like the fire spitting girl. Well, she.
Oh, the hermaphrodite.
Yes, well, actually, I think it was just a dude.
Or the boy dressed as a girl.
Yeah, it was a boy who was dressed as a girl. We didn't know it was actually a boy the entire time. But yeah, no, she found the dogs, and then it's a very brutal scene where she kills all of them. Oh, he kills all of them. Yeah, and she feeds the dogs in a stew to the rest of the carnies without them knowing, and Midori's just sobbing.
Yep.
And at that time, Barney was like about to come in my room, and I'm like, I'm mad now that I had to watch this today.
The dog scene, I think
I'm a big dog guy, so you know
it
that
really hit home.
That just made me mad.
Yeah, it was just very. It was pretty awful. But you know, I mean, what they did really in that first part was just really beat it into your head about how horrible Midori's life is.
Yeah.
And how just horrendous her life is. I feel like another big message of this movie, if we can get down to messages even, but another message of it was, I think, you know, this could happen to anybody. I feel like, you know, be careful, you know, because there's some real evil in the world, and
there's some fucked up people. It's a warning, so maybe
you really got to watch out for yourself. And I think this did kind of enact as a warning in some spaces, but that real whole first part is just her experiencing trauma and loss continuously for just the first half of the entire film, pretty much.
It just keeps going.
You're right. It just keeps happening, but things get better. But when things get better, things just get worse.
Oh yeah, no, she marries like a 30-year-old little person.
Yeah, so we'll enter the magician. The magician comes in. I think this is song 2, probably the second part.
Yeah.
The magician comes in, and he's like a traveling magician, and he's very good at what he does. His big trick is fitting himself into a small glass bottle and coming out of the small glass bottle again. So he starts bringing money to the fairgrounds, and
which they desperately need,
which they need because they don't have money to buy food or anything. So he's bringing in crowds, he's bringing in money, and he gets very taken with Midori, who he's like, "Oh, you're really pretty," and Midori's like, "Oh, that's a little weird, but you're not trying to kill me or anything else, so yeah, all right." And they enter a relationship, and eventually they get married. Even though
and this
I
is shown
think
through
she's
a
about
lot of very
12.
artistic sequences where it's the two of them in like a giant bed of flowers.
Yeah,
At one
like a
point,
meadow.
both of their heads are on bodies of dragonflies, and they're kissing in the sky.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we're going into metaphor town, even though we just saw the explicit assault. What's going? Anyway,
Yeah. But I think it all kind of added up a little bit because the magician
it added up, but it's just like a weird directorial choice. You know what I mean?
It was a weird choice. I think I eventually kind of thought back and was like, okay, that stuff makes a little more sense because this magician guy can kind of bend reality. He's also called like a dwarf by a lot of people, but he can like bend reality.
Right.
And he could do some weird things mentally to people, as we'll get to, I'm sure. But so they start their relationship, and since the magician is like, he's a scary motherfucker, to be honest. He's like,
yep.
Everybody in the fairgrounds doesn't want to deal with him because he can just make their life a living hell. He's also bringing in the most money. So they stop bothering Midori, essentially, because whenever they do bother Midori, this magician
He's like, lay your hands
in.
off my child wife.
Oh, and he just does some crazy ass, like he makes them have visions that Midori is like a 65-foot tall monster, and they're all getting crushed by her. And then once they all have that vision, they're like, all right, we're not fucking with her anymore. Like,
all right, we're gonna slow down here.
Let's not do that. And throughout that, so Midori gets closer to the magician, obviously, like they're married and stuff, and it just becomes very weird at a point, because even weirder than it's been, because I think the turning point of things happens when the guy with no arms, who's like all bandaged up,
right,
tries to talk to Midori, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Midori, like, I'm really sorry for everything I've done, including sexually assault you numerous times.
But like, I love you."
Yeah. What was that? What do you mean you love? What do you what?
I didn't get the impression he actually cared. The impression I got that he was like he wanted to maintain control of her.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So he tried to pull the "I love you" card to regain control of her from this one, because afterwards he made it clear like, Midori is mine. It was a plea to control her. So
yeah, that's a good shout.
Yeah, I didn't buy it as actual love. And next thing you know, it was like the image of him in quicksand, or well, he actually was in quicksand. I don't know. And next thing you know, he's like drowning in quicksand, getting eaten alive by a bunch of ants in the quicksand. The magician appears as the guy drowning. It's like, give me your hand, help yourself. It's like,
yeah.
Translation, give me a hand here.
In the real world, he ended up eating so much dirt that he died.
Yeah. Or did he shove a bunch of dirt? Did the magician shove a bunch of dirt in that guy's mouth after he killed him? Because we see Midori sees that happen and is confused. And tries to run away, and the guy's like, "No, you're my wife, child."
And then this kind of like movie producer comes out of nowhere, and
he just
like,
shows up basically to get killed.
Weird.
I mean,
he just says like, "Oh, I saw the show. Like, I'm a big like Japanese producer for a filmmaker, and Midori, I saw you in the show, and we need somebody like you to play our lead in our new movie.
Yeah.
And if you do this, you'll be very comfortable and make a lot of money." And the magician obviously is like, "No,
nope.
Midori's mine. She's going nowhere." And he rips up the paper, and then she tries to put back together the paper, and then he puts her in a glass bottle.
Before that, though, doesn't he like slam her head into a mirror?
Yeah, I do remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gets from bad to worse for her, to be honest.
No, she just can't catch a break. It's just bad shit happening to this girl for
it is just
45 minutes.
Bad shit. And then the parts that were towards the end, I think became the most contention from people who were, because I had some people who were, I put a reel recently also about SHOJO Tsubaki, and I had some people commenting on it, and the back and forths were actually surprisingly educational in a lot of ways, because they were talking about the end of the show or end of the film and what it was trying to say. And a lot of them said, "Oh, I actually liked SHOJO Tsubaki. quite a lot, but the ending I just didn't really get or understand, or they just kind of fucked it up at the end. And I think the ending was weird, but I sort of got it a little bit.
So what do you think happened?
So I don't exactly know, and I'm not going to say that I do, but I think so. At the end, right, the magician, after like putting her in a bottle, she gets out of the bottle. The magician also goes on a crazy tirade and turns a bunch of people into like horror morphs, and then they turns them back. And I don't really know. The ending is kind of weird in that respect. But then the craziest scene to me, or one of them that didn't involve anything particularly gruesome, was a scene where the magician and Midori are leaving the fairgrounds, and because the magician wants to go on like a world tour and like take Midori with him, and which she agrees to begrudgingly after he ruined her dreams at being a film star. They leave, and they're like waving back at the people at the fairgrounds, and Midori's like, "Oh, bye! Like I hope we'll see each other again." I'm like, why the fuck is she happy? Why the fuck is she like, "Oh, I'll miss them"? What do you mean you'll miss them? What? They ruined your life.
They kidnapped you and beat you and tormented you for years. It's like, bye, everybody.
That was a disconnect that even Stockholm Syndrome could not satisfy as a solution for me, because that was just so ridiculous. And it ended up just getting more and more ridiculous with the magician and Midori being out, and the magician goes to like get something for them, like a food, and he gets stabbed. And then he's dead, and then Midori has to look for him, and then she keeps running over the same area over and over and over again.
And she can't find him.
Seeing the same scene, and then this, like, I feel like should be famous scene of this just one dude sneezing happens like 4 times, and she's looking for him, and she can't find him. And then she turns around, and she's in like this weird like white purgatory-esque kind of area, and there's like cherry blossoms everywhere, and she sees the entire fairgrounds people and the magician. They're all laughing at her, and she tries to smack them with like a stick.
Yeah,
and then she ends up in a void, and then she just gives that absolute blood-curdling scream at the very end of the film, and then that's the end of the film.
Right.
So that's the ending, and there's just some stuff in there that I think has to do with like the magician guy bending reality in some ways, because why the fuck would she tell them that she was like sorry to leave and that she wishes she would see them again? There has to be some like ethereal stuff going on, because the magician also was able to, while she was sleeping, put her in kind of like an alternate reality where everything's perfect and she's with her mom and her dad and they're just having dinner. So there's some mental stuff going on there, and I think there's kind of like a deep dive mentally.
On my first surface level, like there's a couple of different theories I had. You could say I guess the default answer with everything, like a lot of face value people would probably say, those in the camp of face value, be like, is she just going insane? Is she realizing like, hey, is she trapped in her delusions where she thought she was actually going to finally escape? You know what I mean? Was the whole thing basically her like trying to say goodbye and trying to get away from these people? But then something went wrong, and she's realizing, oh, I'm never free. What these people have done to me will linger. I lost my train of thought there. Oh my goodness. But the trauma that she's been put through and all the pain and suffering will linger for the rest of her life, and she'll never be free from it, even if she breaks from the physical location. Is she ever going to be free? Is she trapped? That's kind of what I got into it. Maybe that's a very heavy Anno influence for me, because when I see white purgatories, all I think is my boy Shinji staring into existential dread.
Yes.
So got heavy Anno vibes there. This predates this predates Anno's artsy period. So who knows? But that's what I kind of was thinking. It could be like just like her losing it finally, because she throughout the film she made attempts to get out, and she got closer and closer each time.
Right.
Maybe is this just her realizing she's done so? She's not actually getting out, or the magician thing. It's hard to say. Was he just a very abusive person who like Stockholmed her into this relationship? I don't know. Yes, because there was the reality bending stuff in there. What was that? Was it actually mystical? Was there drugs involved? It was the turn of the century, so who the fuck knows? You can draw a whole bunch of conclusions.
Who knows?
But generally speaking, I didn't really get it.
Yeah, I think that is the main point of that too, because I think we can have our theories and we can go back and forth on this for however long, but I also didn't just really get the ending either. I mean, there are a lot of things that let me pick up like, oh, okay, maybe the fairgrounds people are all dead because the magician's dead, and like they're all like laughing at her, and maybe the magician killed all of them.
Oh, yeah, good point. Good point.
He could have potentially, and he died because he was killed by that thief or whatever.
I like that one.
So I mean, they could be all dead, but then again, like, what does that mean? Like, what does that do? Right? I feel like there's a lot of speculation to be had, but I feel like no concrete answer on what exactly happened. And as somebody that going back to our Evangelion episodes, isn't exactly happy with unfinished endings, weirdly enough, when this ended, I wasn't pissed off about how much I didn't understand about it.
Really?
If that makes any sense.
Well, do you think the length played a factor in that emotion?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because
you're right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a very, very
that thought just came to me, because when you only invest 45 minutes and don't get a proper ending, it's not as abhorrent, or it's not as like,
as like
aggravating,
a 26 episode whole thing. Yeah.
But here's also a very good question. Mm-hmm. When this ended, did you care one way or the other?
I think the whole film is basically me looking at every scene and being like, oh, poor girl. And that never changed.
Yeah.
Throughout the entirety of it. It's just this girl's life, regardless of, having some scenes that could be in purgatory or in this realm or not. Every scene just makes you feel worse and worse and worse for her. And it begins to be like physically horrible, and then it ends up being mentally horrible. Right. So I guess it made me feel something in that respect. What about you in that area?
Truthfully, it was ended. I didn't care one way or the other, because it was just prolonged misery. I never thought there was a moment really. There's a tiny bit after she married the magician where Midori started getting more confidence, started fighting back for herself.
That's right.
I needed more scenes of Midori being happy. I didn't get enough of that, because it's the give and take, the pull and release. That's where the drama comes in for me a lot of the times with something with tonal whiplash. The thing is, this didn't have any tonal whiplash. This didn't have enough. It wasn't very dynamic. It was just misery, 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 misery. If it was misery, hope, crushing misery, I would have loved it. I would have thought, he could really do cool stuff with it. But honestly, there was never a point for me to perk up and go, oh. And, unfortunately, I didn't really get to know Midori too well. She was just, unfortunately, sometimes she felt more like a prop than a character. And that was very sad to me. Because now it's just watching someone be horrible to, a stock character for 45 minutes. If Midori had more oomph, like she was trying to get away, but I didn't, if, cut to a happy memory, you know what I mean? Cut to her actually having a good life before, everything happened to her, and like really wanting to get back home. Make it kind of like the isekai thing, where she's like really desperately trying to get home and going through all this hell to do so. There was ingredients here for something compelling, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But as it stands, we just got this gross, icky film that kind of was just so one note.
Yeah.
That I didn't feel anything. I was just... I don't know if I'm going to forget it necessarily, but I was going, ew, more than anything. And that's my only emotion. It's not a very lasting or impactful one. You know what I mean? If you say SHOJO TSUBAKI to me for the rest of my life, I'm just going to go, ugh.
Yeah.
And that's not as interesting or fun or compelling as me going, oh, that fucking show, or that fucking show, No.
Right. It is more of like a, for me, it's more of just like a, aw.
Yeah.
Geez.
And more of an endurance test. You know what I mean?
It wasn't even, at a point, it wasn't even about, because I feel like all these scenes were made for a purpose, right? I don't think at the end of the day that it is made for shock and for that kind of stuff. I really don't think so. I think it actually has a purpose, but that purpose is seems a bit buried by the end. But I don't know. I think it all just ladders back to experiencing childhood abuse in some form or another, and figuring out how to live with that.
The
trauma.
thing is, though, I feel like I don't know if was there a point, probably, but they didn't do a good job telling you to convey what that point was.
That's exactly it. Like I'm sure there was.
Right.
I feel like there had to be a point to all of this. Otherwise, like it would be so ridiculous to make this thing. So I feel like there has to be a point in maybe like it's related to childhood abuse, or maybe it's related to Japan's historical problems that it's had with itself or other Asian countries in that field, or there could be a lot of different angles at it. But they didn't supply enough content in that regard for us to really understand what they were trying to say. Like, I don't really know what was being said. You can make some arguments, but at the end of the day, after the film, I don't really know what I got.
I can tell you what I got right now, so let's get into our final thoughts here.
Let's get into it.
I got nothing aside from that gross feeling. I really got nothing. Mm-hmm. I stopped feeling bad for Midori very soon because, I was taken out of the story, and I was very aware that I was watching a film. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I wasn't being taken on a journey. I was watching images on a screen, either being still or animating, depending on the fucking second it was in.
Right.
So I got to call this one bad. I got nothing from this. Mm-hmm. I didn't enjoy it at all. Some animation moments were cool. Some visuals were striking in terms of how fucking grotesque they were. And some of the still images were very well drawn. But in terms of the story, there wasn't enough to grab me. It was just all misery. Yeah. And I know I have my misery index where I joke all the time how miserable does a show have to be till I give a shit. You have to have the other side of that coin.
That's right.
When it's all misery, it just weighs you down. You need that crushing misery to accompany joy, optimism, happiness, drive, determination. You need that contrast between light and dark. This just didn't have enough for that for me. Mm-hmm. Was there a point? Sure. But it wasn't conveyed to me in a way that I can fully digest. And if there was a point, wasn't enough to save the 45 minutes of nonsense I just sat through,
Yeah. I think kind of similarly, I maybe have a little bit more sympathy for it, but I do think that it's a true shame, because I feel like it wanted to say something, as I said, but it couldn't really say it, or it couldn't really flesh it out enough to make it clear or make it even extremely understandable for anybody. Beyond like the themes of just abuse and trauma and all those things. And I towards the end, I weirdly kind of lightened up a little bit on it. I think the first half of it, I was just like, oh God, like what am I doing?
Really? Okay.
But then the second half, I think I kind of, all right, you know what? Like, I think there's something to this. Like, I think the visuals swayed me in a way. I think the art swayed me in a way.
Okay.
It's very artistically made, and I think there are maybe one or two merits towards it, especially at the end. I think the end was very, very sad, to the point where, like, I feel like someone could cry at that end. I didn't exactly do that, but I feel like someone could, just seeing if they connect with that character in that way. But I am also going to jump on that wagon with you and say that it was bad. Regardless of all that, because I think what I did with this film is rationalize a lot of things and try to like make sense of a lot of things when they just didn't give me the tools to properly do that. So I can't
were you
call
thinking
it good.
A little bit of what the show could have been versus what it actually was?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was
That's
more
a very
what it
common
could have
mistake.
been,
I've done it a million times myself,
and
that's
more what they
does.
could have achieved. And what they did do was just not enough.
Unfortunately,
not enough
no.
for me
And
to consider it a great or good or decent thing.
And I know we usually say throw a comment in or whatever, just like to talk, just to why not. But in this case, if you feel like you got this show and we're missing something, please write us and tell us what the point was, or like what your interpretation of the point is, please. Because I don't know. I was just grossed out and a little sad, but not sad enough to care. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I get you. Well,
so that's where I stand on SHOJO Tsubaki. I mean,
and that's where we are. And I, weirdly enough, I'm happy we watched it because it does have that string of like infamy. I feel like
exactly. I'm very glad for a historical and completionist perspective that we watched it. Never
but
would
not
recommend
personally.
it.
But not personally.
Yeah.
I would definitely not recommend it to anybody for sure.
No.
It would not be on the tip of my tongue or the back of my tongue for anybody looking to get into a decent film, an anime film. So
right.
But yeah, as Rob said, if you enjoyed this or if you have big opinions on it, write us. You know where to find us. But until then, we'll talk about something a little bit happier next episode.
Yeah, we're gonna need to pick up a little bit after this. I'm gonna chug a beer real quick so I can perk up a little bit. Have a good day, everybody. Don't get kidnapped by carnies.
It's bad.
Wow, oh my god, what a rousing podcast of anime conversation. Am I right, my compares? Am I right, my weebdom? Anywho, yeah, you can send us a message if you want. Did you like this podcast? Did you hate this podcast? Do you want to kill me? Do you want to drench me in Calaxosaur blood and watch me drink it? That's fine. Just send us an email at badanimepod@gmail.com or DM us on our Instagram at badanimepod, all one word. You can also find us on YouTube as Bad Anime, and you could leave a comment on whatever video you want to leave a comment on. We'll read them all anyways. We don't care. I love you. Kiss, kiss.
Simple Equations Podcast Network.